Hi, I'm Alexa Ray Corriea, and this is the Game Maker's Notebook podcast. Today, I spoke with Dmitry Svetlow, the director of Indika. I'm not going to say too much. This is a very spoilery podcast, so make sure you've played Indika before you go and jump in. But Dmitry had a lot of interesting things to say about game development, about finding your voice, working on scripts, working as a group, editing, stuff like that, and the juxtaposition of themes and tropes and even use of color and music in his game. So please enjoy. I definitely enjoyed having this conversation.
The story of a strong woman.
Sorry.
Sent on an important mission.
I forgot myself for a moment. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
During which she will discover her life's true purpose.
Did we climb all the way here just for this?
Her name is...
You. The cloistress is here!
None is fine.
Indika. The story of a nun told as a racing game,
No.
a loot-based RPG,
No.
a city builder,
No.
an arcade game,
Not.
a walking sim,
No.
a survival horror,
Not.
as a comedy,
No.
or a tragedy?
No.
No, none of that. Indika, a subversive, self-endeavorous, multi-meta-layered, non-perspective, conscious-driven action answer seeker out now.
All right. So, question I like to ask everybody at the start of this, but yours, I'm very, very interested to hear the story. How did you get into game development? I understand you were an architect in a previous life.
Correct. Yeah.
So how did you get here?
I think it's a pretty common story because I think I became an architect. Firstly, I dreamed to be an artist, to draw, and as always, my parents said, "Okay, it's not a serious job. You should do something more serious." So I became an architect, and I was interested in 3D graphics and all kind of technology connected to the art. So then my way led to CG, and then apparently to game development.
Oh no! So you also had the parents that were like, "We don't understand.
No,
this." So.
Not at all. Actually, they were right. It's difficult to be just an artist, right?
Yeah.
No, I actually am pretty glad that because for me right now being an architect is a bad thing for a game development. Right now we have 3 architects in our studio.
Oh wow!
And they are the best.
What are they all like? What is their discipline? What do they make?
Obviously, they are connected to the art. So one of our director and another is a lead level artist.
That's really cool. Why Indika? I've read a couple of previous interviews you've done, and this particular quote stood out to me. So I wanted to kind of unpack that and go through that with you. The theme of religion has always fascinated me because I grew up in a very religious family and often stayed for weeks at a time in a women's monastery as a pilgrim. Can you talk a little bit about that? That was really kind of a surprise to me.
I don't think it's very common, but yes, my mother was a very religious woman, and she took me to the monastery.
But were you like I'm fascinated by the idea that you were living in this environment, like you were 24/7 living in a monastery for some parts of your life.
Yeah,
what was that like?
Right now, it looks like it was terrifying, but back there. It was pretty okay. No, it wasn't really terrifying. It's terrifying right now sitting in the fancy room, because living in a monastery isn't a nice thing, right? Because all you need to do is hard work, praying. What else? I don't know. Looking at horse eating grass. And eating that terrible monastery food because they're trying to how to say to defeat their body. So you cannot eat rich food there, because it will make your body wrong,
You can't. So you can't eat food that you enjoy. Were you like scrubbing floors and like
Kind
very?
of. I was very
My
small, so
gosh,
I didn't have a lot of hard work, but my mother did. Yeah, I remember.
that's wild to me. I played Indika, and then I read this. I read this interview with you, and sort of a lot of things that I played and kind of witnessed in Indika started to make sense to me. The other half of that quote is, this story is fundamentally based on my personal experience, my journey of moving away from religion. It sounds like this was both a mental and a physical moving away from that.
Yeah, but for me, Indica isn't about religion.
Okay.
Of course, it is about religion, but it's just the second thing. The first thing is about a human itself, right?
Mhm.
Because I can imagine Indica in another setting, in a space, in I don't know, Wild West or something like that. For me, it's a story of a human who mm, cannot love himself, cannot
Yeah.
forgive himself,
Yeah.
and
Did
in living in a constant fear of not being good enough, and she believed that she doesn't deserve to be loved.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about her specifically. Did the idea where did the idea of her being, because obviously, yes, she feels like she's not worthy, but you have her this thread with her the other nuns, and eventually, she ends up finding out that they're just defrocking her. And it seems like they just don't really like her. So where did that for you, where was the narrative purpose or like the kernel of that story that came to you having this ostracized nun? It's like very Sound of Music, but like sinister and worse.
I think for me, a monastery is a kind of a symbol of family or
Mm,
society in general. So most of our problems started when we were young, right? So that feeling that in your family you're not the best child, or not the best brother among few. You know what I mean?
mhm. I do. As the ostracized eldest daughter, I definitely feel that.
Mm,
Um, I think that a lot of us can identify with being scorned. This is what one of the themes that I really enjoyed about Indika. The feeling of being scorned by a system we were told would welcome us. That would be the
absolutely.
place for us to find that, only to find the opposite. And that's such a heavy theme, but it's juxtaposed with a lot of really nice dark comedy. So what made you decide to make this story a dark comedy, essentially?
I think I believe that you shouldn't tell serious stories with the serious face. It just doesn't work like that. Because when you start with the serious topics, I think most of the viewers or players will have a natural barrier. They don't want
Mm.
to deep down into some problematic stuff, right? You just have to earn their trust and then punch them in the face. But
Yeah.
only after that.
Is there a piece of media or place that you took that inspiration from as you were making Indica? Like what did you consume that gave you that feeling and made you want to translate that into Indica?
I always liked watching films a lot, so probably
Mm.
from movies.
Yeah. It's very, I think you've described Indica in some interviews before as an art house film of a game, which I can definitely see and I think is really cool. Um, Going back to that juxtaposition of tone where you talk about not being too serious and wanting to punch them in the face, something that immediately comes to mind, or one of the, I think, best examples of this in the game is that scene towards the beginning when they're accepting the Eucharist. For those of you who are listening who don't know what that is, that's the wafer, the crouton of Christ that they give you, that like little paper thing.
Body and
And
blood of Christ, yeah.
yes, and they're I can't believe I just called it the crouton of Christ. That's what I called it when I was in Catholic school. I'm a lapsed Christian as well. We can get to that later. But before she's receiving it, the devil sort of appears as this dancing little man with some like kind of fun techno music. So I would love to hear about the design process that went into structuring that specific moment, because it is such a tone setter for the rest of the game.
To be honest, I don't like to explain things.
Sure.
But if you ask for this one, I think it started with the idea that Indika felt that it's not body of Christ that they giving her, but it's kind of body of, because the small person is just how to call her, the mother abbess, but a smaller version, right?
Yeah.
So the idea that they give her not the Christ body, but the body of mother abbess, if it makes sense to you.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really cute. I remember playing through that part and just being like, this is going to be a ride. This is going to be awesome. For to kind of switch topics a little bit, I want to talk about how you jump between different genres and styles. It's very interesting how you have, this sort of more realistic, again, very art house look for the current day part of the story, but all of Indika's memories are a completely different gameplay style. What made you decide you wanted to do that?
If you probably noticed, the idea of contrast itself is one of the pillars in everything, in graphics, in the story, in the music, and everything. So if you want to show something very realistic and deep, I think it works better when you build it on the contrast with another, I don't know, shallow, bright, vivid part of the story.
Yeah.
So that's the one answer. The second one, I think it just works pretty well because when we were young, the world kind of was like a game for us, right? And everything was vivid and joyful.
Yeah. You also just described that section as shallow as well. You said shallow and bright. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Shallow, not in a bad way.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, that's joyful.
Joyful, less burdensome.
Exactly.
I guess is what you're looking for. It does. I definitely picked up on the sort of dreaminess of her flashbacks, which is really cool. The playing with colors as well. How and then you do this with sound as well. I'd love to hear more about the thought process that went into the audio design for Indika, especially for how you kind of have the very you have your music for, again, your modern segments, the ones that are a little more realistic, and then you kind of have that like joyful, like when I'm playing those sections, I feel like I'm playing an older game, a game from like the 90s or earlier. Like they really feel like two sort of distinct games. So I'd love to know about the audio design for that.
Oh, music always was a struggle for me. It's so difficult to find the right tone. We had so many versions of everything. And I don't know, at some point you think, oh, this is exactly what we need. And then week after you think, oh, okay, we need something else. But fortunately, our composer is kind of genius. So he find the right tone because I said one that we want that feeling of depersonalization. We wanted player to be, how to say it, anti-engaged. If it makes sense.
Anti-engaged, like observing, like just.
Let me find the right word. So, sorry about my English. Depersonalization is a very good term if you know what it means.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we wanted to show, to force player to understand that he is playing the game, because the whole idea of the game in the game is a very important thing for us.
Yeah, I definitely see that depersonalization kind of come back and forth in the power of prayer. You have a couple segments where she can kind of like pray and keep the world at bay. I would love to know where the idea to use prayer as a game mechanic sort of came from, like to change the environment.
Most of the people don't notice that when she prays, she holds her rosemary so tight that the blood starts to to appear there. And for us, it was the symbol of her self-torturing. Probably it's not so obvious, but praying is just punishing herself. That's what the main idea. So we needed to combine the gameplay and this narrative idea. So the decision was kind of obvious.
I'd
Because
like to.
she's
No, go
literally
ahead.
trying to keep the world together in the moment when the world is kind of breaking apart.
Yeah. When you were writing her character, how that idea of self punishment, is that something that sort of came from, putting together the themes, putting the story together, or is there a more personal kind of connection to that idea? Because it's a very self punishment is a very dark and a very strong theme.
I think it's a core of probably any religious idea, and especially of Russian Orthodox Church, because you constantly have to feel that you're not good enough, that you have to obey and confess you're bad, and I think we're all living in some scale of the same perception, right? I think we all feel that we're not good enough. We're all trying um, to earn some points in our lives, in relationships, in school, in everything. We all have these grades.
Yeah.
So of course it's personal. And actually, in the first version of the script, Indika was a man.
Oh,
because
wow. Okay.
not just because I'm a man and it was easier for me to write this character.
Sure.
Just, I don't know, on the second or probably third version of the script, I just probably the story will work better with the female character because it's clicks better,
Yeah.
because kind of women of the time were more oppressed than a man, obviously. And when I wrote it for the first time, actually one of my friends was a prototype for the character, because he was a younger brother in a family where his brother was very successful, and I was a witness of some moments when he was literally punishing himself physically, and it
Oh,
was so painful to watch.
yeah.
And I wanted to prove him that he is good enough, that he is worthy of love and everything.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Um, I was going to ask, Indika herself, how much of her is you, how much of her is someone else that you know. She is so gentle and sweet, but at the same time, she has quite a strong vibe. Like she's a very strong, like very unassuming, strong character.
Oh,
So
that's a
yeah,
very good idea, because we were recording a motion capture for this character. Uh, you will be surprised, but many things were recorded by me, because when we tried to record it with mm, our female employee, she was too um, too how to say it, too girlish, too female.
sure,
I
yeah.
wanted her to be more male, if it makes sense.
It does. It does. She definitely gives off the vibe of of carrying herself in a little more of a little bit of a stronger way than I think a nun. Like you can see it when she's walking with the nuns. Like even the way she walks, the way she carries herself is very different. So it sounds like Indika herself is sort of a mix of you and your friend. Um, I want to
Yeah, kind of.
I want to talk about her and Ilya. Like if she used to be like, at what point when you were building the story did Ilya come into it? Because he's such an interesting character.
I think he was another contrast in this story, because she's
Yeah.
a nun talking with the devil, and he's a convict talking with God, right? And I
Yeah.
think he just helps to tell this story,
Yeah.
because sometimes sometimes there are things that you should stop trying to chase, and sometimes it's important to get rid of some things. So it's not always uh, like this. Sometimes you have to find a balance.
when you were writing this story, how did you find that balance between those two characters? Like, obviously, as I'm fellow writer, there's always that moment where everything clicks and everything feels like it's working together. So I'd love to know more about the process of finding these two characters and getting them into a position where they were a good contrast for each other in relation to, your overall setting, because they are very much products, Ilya especially, products of the time period that you've set up.
There's a complicated question. You know what's interesting? It's interesting to find a moment where your characters start to speak by themselves, because when you sometimes you spend months after months trying to find the right words, to find the right ideas, and after some amount of work, it clicks and they start to speak by themselves. Especially when you try to record some real actors, you start to feel the voice, you start to see them, and it's become very easy to find the right words and right scenes. It's kind of magic for me.
Yeah, no, it's definitely it's all witchcraft, actually. But for you, what is that moment like? How do you identify, oh, my characters are speaking to me now, I can hear them? Like, what is that moment like for you?
I still don't know.
That's a good answer. I don't think a lot of us really know. I think we just kind of get there and it's like, oh, we found it at some point, some draft. It just picked up.
And sometimes you sit and it just want to happen, and you completely feel like it's a disaster. It doesn't work.
Yeah. And
someday it just comes.
What is your revision process like for that? Like, when you find something that's not quite working, are you a, sit down with the team and hash it out? Do you kind of go and you think about it for a while? Like, what is your process like?
Actually, I wasn't writing it by myself. I have another author who helped me, and he's a real actor. He now works in the theater.
Wow.
So he helped me a lot because he has a very good imagination. He could have imagined the whole scene with all the little details, and it's amazing when he starts to ask questions, because it's very easy to find a cool scene, right, with cool words or something. But then if you won't ask enough questions, why he said that, what's going on around them, it just won't work.
Yeah. I definitely prefer working with collaborators than alone, because I feel like, again, with the dialogue, you can get to that place faster, I feel like.
Yeah.
I can empathize with all of that.
and another idea, I think you shouldn't stop at least before you feel that everything is perfect. Okay, let's be honest, it's never perfect enough. But
sure.
If you but I don't know, there were many moments when I could have just said, okay, it's okay, but you shouldn't do that. Never. It shouldn't be okay. It should be, I don't know, not brilliant, but at least good.
Can you share what one of those moments was?
It's not about moments. We rewrote the whole script at least 4 times from scratch. Can you imagine?
Oh, what, from scratch?
Yeah, kinda, of course.
Oh, wow.
There were many similar moments, and the structure were the same, but we rewrote scenes, we rewrote all the dialogues.
Wow, that's a huge revision. Speaking of revision and your writing and your characters, I do want to talk about your version of the devil in your game. Obviously, he's, we've seen him in many media before. He always portrayed as, you had the option to portray him as like some like really, really gross kind of like nasty thing, or, being a little more sympathetic, but you've managed to create a character who is actually like almost charismatic. Like, I got really excited whenever I heard from him because of the way that you wrote him, the cadence of the performance, the words that he uses. So given all of kind of the baggage that comes with writing the devil as a character, I would love to know about the process of finding him in your story.
I think he's the least complicated character, actually.
Really?
It's very easy to find the devil. I think it's obvious why, because he's so charismatic.
Hmm.
He said the most interesting things and lines in the story. And to be honest, he doesn't have to be, deep. He can be just
Mm.
extremely charismatic. It's sad because it's very common story when people appreciate not very complicated and sophisticated characters, but
Yeah.
the most expressive ones.
Yes.
It's like in theater, sometimes people clap a lot for some actor who portrayed a drunk person. Oh, wow. And you understand that it's probably was the easiest part in the play.
Yeah. Did the perform when you were looking for like casting him, like finding his voice, why the decision to, I guess you kind of segueing into this, why the decision to make him sound just like kind of almost like you're turning and like talking to a friend as opposed to like, like adding some reverb on him or something like that, making him all like humanizing him a little bit almost.
Because devil, I don't like to say this, but okay, devil is just Indika, right? And
Yeah.
even when you see her in the mirror in the final scene,
Yes.
you see that he's feminine. He has boobies.
Yes. Yes. I did notice that. That was a shock to me. I think I went through I went through the game very much in misdirection. I felt very much like, oh yes, I am possessed by the devil, and you meet this character who says they're talking to God, and I'm like, oh, there's gonna be this like comeuppance at the end. And then you kind of have that anti-catharsis and you look in the mirror, and I was like, it's been me the whole time. Which is just I thought incredible. That also the design, like why the four arms? I mean, we know why he has boobs now, but like why the four arms? Why kind of this almost like spindly, spidery look?
Actually, there was a part of the game that we haven't finished
Oh.
because there were a small part when you should have been playing for the devil, and he used one pair of his arms, and another forearms. With them, he was holding Indika. Yeah,
Oh. That's
and actually,
really
we still have it, in the engine internally, but
oh my
probably sometime
gosh.
we will release some little
Yeah.
extra part.
Yeah, I felt like the moment in the when she's kind of falling through the red and he's circling her, that moment where he takes her into his arms while he's speaking to
Yeah.
her, I thought was such a powerful moment. And that was kind of the first indicator to me, oh, okay, they are maybe the same person. Um he says, and I pulled this quote and I really want to dig into it. He says to her, he says to her, good and evil, warm and cold, those are just lines on a thermometer. God and the devil, those are you. One cannot exist without the other. And I would love to unpack that from
For
your
me, for me, it
perspective.
sounds pretty self-explanatory, don't you think?
Yeah. But I love that, like, I'd love to, as a writer, when you come up with lines like this, like these come from so deep within you. So I just love to hear more about writing that segment.
Actually, this segment we rewrote it the most time in the script,
Mm,
because you always balance between saying too much and saying not enough, right?
of course.
I think actually in the previous versions of the script, we were giving more answers, but
Yeah.
then I decided it's much more. Um, it's better to ask the right questions, right? Probably it's not so satisfying, and some people will left with the feeling probably they didn't get all the answer they wanted, right? But it works better for me.
Yeah.
I,
What
I
would you
really prefer this type of ending in the cinema, for example. I don't know. A week ago, I just watched a last movie of Clint Eastwood about the
mm,
trial, and it ends with unanswered questions. And the
yeah.
first impression, oh, wow, I really want to know how it ends. What happened after that? Because the
Yeah.
most important event, he didn't show it to us. But then I find myself thinking about it and discussing it with my wife, right? So probably the best thing. he could have done.
That the ending for Indika is very much. I know I had 1,000 questions. You kind of leave her in a position where, my first question is, where does she go from here? Because that's it. The rosary breaks. You hear it falling on the ground, and then it's just like, I'm in this pawn shop. I don't know what's going on. Okay, and it's very, very jarring. So for you, why the decision to sort of like leave her alone in a pawn shop as opposed to maybe like leaving her alone in like outside or leaving her alone in that jail cell? Like what about that specific moment, the structure of that moment, do you feel like made it the most impactful version?
I just wanted for a player to remember that hole in the bottom of the coudettes. That idea of that hole was very important to me, with the music, with the scene, with everything, because I always thought that maybe if I will be able to push one of the bricks in the wall of value system of the player, it will be the ideal ending for me. I don't want to add anything and say something. I just want to try to shake it a little bit, to try to, I don't know, to get rid of something. And that feeling of emptiness, of despair, is of disappointment, right?
Yeah.
Is what we wanted to achieve with that ending.
Yeah, you said you want to push on and break at least one thing in the value system of the player. I think you just said, and a few a few minutes ago you mentioned telling versus showing, telling the player too much, pulling back, and letting them ask questions. What is your advice to writers, game designers, people who are making things and want to make things like Indika? How do you balance giving the player enough to think about without inundating them with the answers? Like for you, how do you find that balance?
Actually, I don't think that I'm in a position where I should give any advices, because
Why not?
I still feel that I'm learning, and I'm not sure that we did everything exactly right. But I don't know. The honest question, I don't know. I'm still learning to do it. So.
Oh, I mean, I'm also, I feel like any good game developer is always learning for like the entirety of our career. There's things change, like not only does, technology change and the way that we can actually make the game change, but the audience changes, the way that people think changes, the way that the world changes, and the things that we say, change as well. So I think you're actually in a great place to give advice.
Actually, this is the advice. Don't be sure about anything.
Oh, okay.
Don't be certain about anything.
Don't be certain about anything. I am definitely not. So I'm already taking your advice. Back to the moment at the ending when she's shaking the coudettes, and then all the coins start coming out, which is another, I think, juxtaposition that was very jarring for me, because all of a sudden you have the little like 16-bit coins flying everywhere, and you're looking at yourself in the mirror, and it's like, this is the weirdest thing I've ever gone through. And it goes on for a little bit. You can shake it for a while.
For eternity.
I want to talk about those coins, because very early in the game, the coins are presented to the player as, okay, you can collect these, but it's not really, you're not immediately told kind of what you're working towards with them. And it's like, okay, we'll figure it out. And then I think at one point the screen actually says, there's something that says like, the coins don't matter anyway. So I would love to talk about that particular element's inclusion in this game. Like what made you decide to add those, and like, what are they? Because they're so random. They feel random, but I know they're not.
Of course they're not, because the whole game is about this points, about these coins.
Yeah.
Because it's a best representation of the idea that we're trying to earn some points in our lives, right?
Yeah.
And most of the time we, without any understanding why, what for. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Very much so. That's very apparent at the ending when you're shaking it, and you can just get, it's like you can have all the coins you want, but you're not going to mean anything.
The best way to get rid of the meaning of the thing, right?
Yeah.
Because all the things matter before you can get any amount of them.
Yeah. What do you to me it also sort of felt like almost an indictment, not an indictment, but sort of a commentary on gaminess. Again, you've spoken about Indika as very much like a film, obviously, was huge inspiration for you and your team. And adding in sort of this weird gamey element that like doesn't quite feel with it. So was that maybe a thought as well? Kind of like, oh, well, here's like a gaminess aspect.
Actually, I really very like the idea that the game is the best way to approach our lives, because we all
Mm,
kind of play the game, and it's very easy to forget that we're just playing the game, that what we're doing is just the role that we choose to play.
yeah,
So yeah.
that's very interesting. I had to think about that one for a second. That is, I think that um, you're right. Games offer a level of interactivity that you don't get from like sitting and watching a film or reading a book or stuff like that. Games are art. Um, I do want to talk about your team structure. We are in an era right now where a lot more people are kind of going off, starting their own studios, creating their own teams, wanting to make things like Indika on their own outside of, a big AAA studio. So I want to talk about your experience with game development. Another quote of yours, you talked about how no one on your team had ever made a game in this genre before or hadn't made a game at all. So you spent a lot of time prototyping, researching, testing until you found what you wanted to make. And I would love to hear more about that journey, because I know there are like our audience for this podcast is largely developers, but also
Mhm.
students listen, like a lot of aspiring developers listen. So I would love for you to talk about that journey, like what that journey was like for you and
Okay,
everyone.
to say that nobody in our team never worked in a game dev industry, not 100% true, because it wasn't the first game of the studio.
Right.
We released the first game before for VR, but I think at least 80% of people worked in a game dev for the first time. That's true. The process, oh, it's a good question. It's difficult for me to find something interesting to say about this. Probably you have some specific questions.
Yeah, I'm very curious about because people talk about the indie environment as being
Hmm.
very much like people have to multi-class, you have to wear different hats.
Absolutely.
And I feel like the version of game development that often gets fed to especially students and young developers is you have the one job, you go into your studio and like you do your job in the corner and you don't really get to kind of do a lot of cross-discipline work. So you said, everyone, your indie studio in the classical sense, everyone has to perform multiple roles. So I would love to hear
Exactly.
how you make that work, what that's like.
I think from the day one, I made a decision to find very specific people. It was
Mm.
important for me to find people who would be able to make most of the decisions themselves, because we don't have like a good pipelines for every part of work. For example, as far as I know, in big studios, when you create some asset for the game, for example, 3D model, you have a whole process for it. Some sketches, then art director approvals, then I don't know, something else, and then 3D modeler, then approval. Uh, in our case, I always preferred it to be another way. I just wanted to come to a 3D modeler and say, we need, I don't know, a machine,
Yeah.
and then go away.
Okay. Yeah.
And it won't work with some people, right? Because it's another process when he should be mm, doing most of the part himself, right? To find the good references, to make a sketch, to model it, to texture it, and even add and commit it to the engine.
Yeah. So do you think it is a much more valuable skill, or it's beneficial to be able to kind of be a multi-classer, someone who can do multiple roles, who can take on that entire pipeline by themselves? Because I think you mentioned also that you're not manager heavy. You don't have a lot of sort of
We don't
management.
have any PMs in our studio. Can you imagine?
Really?
We don't have any managers. You really?
How does that work? Is like everyone sort of just managing their own workload? It's very individual responsibility focused.
Just keep in mind that we're a very small team.
Right,
Indika
right.
was made by 15 people, and
Amazing.
I read a lot of books about team management and project management. And I think it was said that it's okay to have a team under 13 people without any management, because when the team is small, people just can make all the decisions by themselves. So
Yeah.
that's one reason, and another, of course, very specific people.
Very specific people. Yes. The end of the quote that I was referencing, you said, if you find the right people, the result can exceed all expectations.
Yeah.
Talking to you as we've been talking, it made me think of another game made by people who came from a different disciplinary backgrounds, who decided to make a game to tell the story they wanted to tell. And that's 1000 Times Resist. I don't know if you played that game. It's
Which one?
phenomenal. 1000 Times Resist.
No.
It's like the very well. Highly recommend you check it out. But it was made by, where the point I was getting to is, it was made by theater performers who couldn't perform during the pandemic, and so they taught themselves like how to make a game and release that game this year, and it's gotten a lot of accolades as well, which is really cool. So, how would you do you have words of encouragement or recommendation for, people like you, coming from other disciplines, who want to jump into this kind of life, the game development lifestyle?
You know what's interesting? Now it looks that probably small studios will have some advantage before huge studios, because we have many new ways to produce things, and probably in a couple of years, AI will replace some professions even. So it's a good idea to prepare yourself for a working environment of a small indie team, right? And the main advice: don't be afraid to take responsibility for everything. For example, when I'm looking for another employees right now, I'm giving a test job, and most of the time it's very poorly explained. I just say, just make a cool thing with this. For me, it's a way to see how a person would react, because some people say, "Oh, it's a bullshit task because I don't have any references, I don't have enough explanation. You're a bad employer." Okay, I I think it's a good approach. If you work in a huge AAA studio, probably it's how it should be done, right? You shouldn't be doing everything by yourself. You just should have, I don't know, a free list of explanations, of references, of everything. But in Udmidor, it's important to be able to find everything yourself.
Yeah, that's great advice. Also, a memory just came screaming back to me of like every highly specific writing test I've ever been given that had no real parameters for me to kind of like create. So I love the idea that your test is like, make something cool. Just do it. You figure it out. You tell me what it is. You tell me it's cool. I love that. I love that so much. Part of the theme running through Indika, and in talking to you, reading your interviews, I know that your departure from Russia played a big part in Indika's creation. And I just wanted to well, first of all, I'm sorry all of that happened to you, and I'm sorry you had to go through that. Did the movement and the way your literal movement to another place to finish Indika while you were working on Indika, how much influence did that have on individual pieces of design or on your narrative? Because I see the fleeing. I see everyone in Indika is fleeing from something, but I wanted to hear in your own words.
Frankly speaking, all the script was ready before we moved to another country. So no, the answer is no. There's no connection with that in the game.
Oh, okay.
If of course, it was difficult at some points and fun at some points, because when we left when we moved the whole studio to Kazakhstan for a couple of months, we lived in a one house. Can you
Oh my
imagine that?
gosh. All of you?
Most of our guys, yeah.
Oh, wow. That does sound, that's like
We-
game dev sleepover.
yeah.
Um,
I wouldn't recommend it to everyone because it's a tough experience, but very fun at the same time.
it's like the most like a game jam, except you're all like constantly on each other. How did, obviously, Indika has been released. It's gotten a lot of great press and recognitions. So it doesn't seem like your departure really affected development. You guys were able to keep things going at a clip. And that's really inspiring, knowing, you were going through a lot of personal hardship, but you still managed to create this beautiful piece of art. And, I think I can speak for a few other people in my industry who are managing the drama of the American experience right now, that it is difficult to create art. So for you personally, if you have, any advice or thoughts on how to persevere in creating what we want to create in the face of, I'm waving my hands around at everything, at the world, but I would love to hear your advice.
Okay, again, I don't think that I have some specific advices, because for me, to be honest, nothing changed when we left country, because just before I had my team around me and my computer, and that's like 99% of my life. Okay, now we moved to another country, the same computer, the same team. I almost didn't notice the change, to be honest.
That is great advice, though. There's something in that. You were focused on what you were making and on your people.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's focus on your people.
If you really believe in what you're doing, nothing can distract you, I think.
Yeah.
Even such terrible events.
Yeah.
Like
I think it's easy for us to forget that, for sure.
Yeah.
So moving forward, Indika's out. Obviously, it sounds like you are getting ready to maybe add some people to your team moving forward. So what is and we've talked a little bit about how smaller studios will have an advantage moving forward in this industry, where, we have generative AI being pushed by big companies, and the landscape is changing, but we're seeing this big indie boom.
Definitely.
So what are your hopes for the industry moving forward? Like, you are a big player in it. So what are you hoping for? What do you want to see? What are you going to push for?
I just hope that narrative games won't be abandoned, because now I see that many publisher investors really afraid of investing their time and money into this kind of games, because unfortunately statistics show that these kind of games aren't the most financially successful. One of the reasons, of course, that many people prefer to finish the game on YouTube or Twitch, especially this kind of games, and everybody wants you to make something that should be replayable, probably not so interesting on YouTube.
Yeah. I was just talking to someone recently about, like, the push for live services. I bet I don't feel like that. Those aren't the games that people talk about. It's the narrative games like Indika that people talk about, right?
But don't pay a lot of money for it, unfortunately.
Well,
but it's okay. At the same time, it's okay, because when I was watching the budgets and money earned by my favorite directors, for example, it's no comparison with a huge Hollywood franchises, which for me is kind of
yeah.
But they earn, I don't know, 100 times more money.
But
so probably it's okay. It's our life.
Yeah, but it sounds like, like, money will come, but commitment to your vision does, like you said, commitment to your vision can exceed all expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I was very excited to talk to you. I loved Indika.
Thank you.
And thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys make next.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for having me. I had a very good time.
Thank you.